Welcome to the Maintenance Log, where I document my story of going from an aircraft mechanic to a pilot. It hasn't happened yet, but this is my journey as it's unfolding. And this particular video is the story of how trying to do that the first time almost gave me AIDS, which is aviation-induced divorce syndrome. I know it's different than what you were thinking, and maybe the title was misleading, but here we are. The backstory on that is I originally got into aviation because I wanted to be a pilot. Because, everybody thinks airplanes, they think flying. Well, as I was looking into that avenue, I came across a guy who was a recruiter for Spartan College of Aeronautics up in Tulsa. And so it sounded like a pretty awesome setup. I like mechanical things and I like airplanes. So I figured, sure, I'll go ahead and do the aviation maintenance thing, and then that'll be my way to get in and be a pilot. And it turns out it's a lot more to it than that. So I get in, I do my schooling, I get done with my A&P program. Shortly after, I have my first kid, I get married, and everything's going so far so good. I got a job at Spirit Aerosystems up in Tulsa, manufacturing the wing assemblies for the Gulfstream 650, which is a pretty cool aircraft. If anybody wants to talk about that, I could definitely talk about that. It's an interesting job. It was the first time I'd ever been in aviation as a professional, and the manufacturing side was kind of cool. I did a lot of the final assembly stuff, so I was putting hydraulic lines on and getting the landing gear assemblies, not really the landing gear, but the bracketing and everything ready for it. So it was really interesting, unlike anything I'd ever done before that. And at that time I was like 19, 20 years old, something like that. And after that, I ended up going from Tulsa to Oklahoma City, getting a job at AAR, which is a really large maintenance, repair, overhaul facility. I believe the second largest on the planet. And while I was there, I worked on MD-80s, a little bit on CRJs, and mostly I worked on the Alaskan Airline 737s. I did a range of maintenance stuff there, so I didn't really specialize in anything. I just showed up and did whatever was on the roster for the day. That job was kind of difficult because it was a feast or famine kind of pace, and being young and in a early marriage and young kids, I already had one toddler, I had another newborn on the way, and it was difficult going without work for stretches of time. And if there's no jet in the hangar, I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. So it was really difficult to balance everything. And I ended up trying, I living in a really crappy apartment, surrounded by felons and drug dealers and stuff like that. It was a rough area. So I need to get my family out of there. I need to be stable income, better hours. So I moved over, and luckily I got a really good job at Tinker Air Force Base. I was working on B-1 bombers, and that was really cool. It was the first time I'd ever worked on a military aircraft, and the B-1 is just remarkable in its capabilities. An aircraft that size being able to go, almost Mach 2 was pretty impressive. I mean, it's a huge plane to be moving that fast. And then, it has the wing sweep capabilities, and just everything that thing can carry is just amazing. It's a really cool aircraft performance-wise. It is really maintenance intensive. Aging airframe and having all of the redundant systems and everything. It's a challenge to work on sometimes, but it's still really cool aircraft. Awesome. It was a great opportunity, and I liked it for the most part, but I still really wanted to get back into piloting. And so I also wanted to maintain my A&P license because I really wanted to get my IA, which is my inspection authorization. Because I figured if I got my IA, maybe I could do annual inspections on the side and build up, and maybe one day I could, have a repair station, or I could still pursue the piloting thing and, be a professional pilot, something, or maybe be some kind of hybrid, sort of like Mike Bush from Savvy Aviation. So I just figured, you know what, I'm going to start pursuing this. I'm going to shop my resume around and see what happens. So I shopped it around a couple of the shops out in a local small airport, and I got a couple hits. I got a hit from a sheet metal shop, and really good group of guys there. Associated Aero Services out at Wiley Post, and they're really, really knowledgeable. They really know what they're doing. So I learned quite a bit there working part-time. I was working night shift out at the Air Force Base, and then working during the day learning sheet metal. I just kind of did the hours I could do, and that went well for a few months, and I was getting really worn down with all of the just the hours in general of trying to, it was getting kind of stretched thin. Also, I had my third kid on the way, and in case you're wondering, we stopped at 3 later on, but yeah, so it's not going to be, a reoccurring theme of having a million kids. Anyway, so had my third kid on the way, and I've got a couple kids at home, and so we're going, and I was getting kind of stretched thin, but I knew I still wanted to go into piloting. I knew I still wanted to be in FAA regulated aviation. So I was considering leaving to go at the sheet metal shop full time, but it didn't seem like there was consistent work there. And right around that time, I got contacted by a flight school, and I talked to the guy out there, and he seemed really interested in my resume, and had 8 aircraft that the flight school owned, and then they maintained aircraft for other customers. So they had kind of a Part 61 and Part 61 and Part 135 or 145 situation going on. Guy did a little bit of everything. So he had the repair station side of his business, and then he had the flight school side of his business. And I thought that was really cool, as I'm like, well, that's the best of both worlds. I'm a mechanic, and I can maintain these planes, and that'll help me get my IA, and maybe it'll help me get my pilot license. And so I worked out an agreement with the guy. If I did go out there full time, I worked out there part time between the sheet metal shop and the Air Force Base, and worked out an agreement that I'd go out there, I'd work full time and learn the aircraft, all the airframes that he's got, and slowly, take over all of the maintenance. And eventually, in return, he would pay for me to get my IA test, and then he was also going to give me free flight lessons. And that was going all right. At the beginning, I was pretty excited because, he was able to match the pay that I was making out at Tinker, and then I had consistent work out there. So it was kind of checking all the boxes. Well, that kind of started falling apart a little bit. Some paychecks started bouncing, and just having difficulty scheduling any flights or anything like that. It was a challenging time, and I'm not going to say it was all 100% that company's fault. It was a one-man shop, and guys pulled in several directions. And partly my fault for not being really consistent and making sure things got scheduled for flight time and stuff like that. And I had young kids, and I was pretty stretched thin at home also. So, but the bouncing paychecks caused a lot of issues, and sometimes it took another additional week or more to get paid. Well, because of that, at this period of time, I was living in a mobile home park because it was affordable. So I was living there, and I was paying my bills, but the lot rent for the trailer and the not really a mortgage, but the loan payment for the trailer itself are two separate bills, and they just kept increasing the lot rent to the point where my lot rent was more than what I was paying to actually buy the mobile home. But they had bylaws and stuff that I couldn't move the mobile home. It's really expensive to move those anyway, so it wasn't like I could just pick up and pull out of there and set up somewhere else. It was a dilemma, but because of the bounce paychecks and all the cascading financial issues, it led to a lot of complications. Slowly, it ended up causing me to have my car repossessed. And then with the car repossessed, I didn't have any time or didn't have any money to keep doing everything else, because it was difficult to drive around and get to work and get my wife where she needed to go, get my kids where they need to go, all that. Obviously, it was challenging to operate a family with no vehicle. I was still trying to make things work out at the flight school. Ultimately, it just wasn't going well, so I went ahead and applied back out at Tinker, and I applied, and all of a sudden there was a federal hiring freeze, so I had to wait 9 months for that to clear out. And finally, after 9 months of just financial issue after financial issue after financial issue, my wife and I ended up having to file bankruptcy. And so we basically we lost essentially everything. And right around the time that we were filing bankruptcy, I was finally getting call back from the Air Force Base, and I obviously accepted. Oddly enough, I applied for an aircraft mechanic position at the Air Force Base, and I got declined for that. They said I didn't have the work experience, even though it clearly showed that I had already done that job at that base previously. But regardless, I got picked up in an engine shop, which ended up being the engine shop that maintains the F-135 engine, which is the engine for the F-35 Lightning II Joint Strike Fighter, which is pretty cool, because there's variations to the engines, and it's a pretty solid engine, and it's pretty straightforward to work on it. It's not as complicated as I thought going in. I was really intimidated by it whenever I first started. But now I've been there 8 years and doing the same engine, and it's just an engine. Anywho, and I talk in depth about that if that's something that anybody's interested in. But so I'm working at the engine shop. I get the job at the engine shop. My wife and I, go through the whole bankruptcy thing, which was brutal. It's brutal. And because my wife is a bit of a honey badger, while I was at work and trying to get that revenue stream coming back in, she was just full steam ahead finding our next place. Before we lost the place that we're in, before we lost the mobile home, she was trying to find the next rental, She drove around every hour of the day that she possibly could. If she wasn't sleeping, and if she wasn't at work or something, she was driving, looking for a rental. And while she was doing that, on the very last day, we were supposed to be, well, not the very last day, but like the last week that we were supposed to be out of the mobile home, she came across a rental house that this elderly couple was renting, and just called me up and said, hey, they're going to let us do a viewing today, and it's just a direct owner. It's not through a big company or anything. I think we could do this. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I go over there, we check out the rental house, we talk to the guy, real nice elderly guy, and he gives us the rental agreement, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, don't you need to do a background check and all this other crazy stuff? And he's like, no, I can kind of tell by talking to you and, seeing you guys, you seem like reasonable people. So, I mean, the dude took a huge risk, but he went ahead and gave us the property. So, day one, we burned the place down. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't do that. We got in, we moved in, totally saved us. So we get in, and we ended up staying there for about 4 years. It was great. Loved the house. Great neighborhood, right down the street from a school. Everything you could ask for a rental house. And it was like $500 a month less than anything we could have gotten similar. It was great priced. And there's no hook around the corner or anything like that with it. It was a great property. Pretty solid landlords, all things considered. So everything's looking up, everything's going well, and getting our life back on track, and just kind of pushing through it, just doing the work, getting through it. And well, my kids grew up a little more. Now I'm doing all right. But where the whole AIDS thing came in is there for a period when we're going through the bankruptcy, we're about losing everything, and I hadn't really gotten the job secured at Tinker, and I had this really crappy job that kept kind of screwing us over a lot. My wife was just at her wit's ends. I would not have blamed her if she decided it was too much and had to walk away, because we've been together since we were 14, and it's been a journey. It has been a journey. We have overcome a lot. So I could see if she was thinking about, just cutting her ties with, Murphy's Law over here. What can go wrong will go wrong. And I would not have blamed her. But like I said, she's a bit of a honey badger, so she stayed at it, and we got through it. We weathered that storm together, and it was great. I was certainly relieved that I was able to get through it and keep my family, and be able to relieve that stress and everything for my wife. I'm sure she was thrilled as well that I was able to come through and not be a colossal waste of time. But anyway, so now I'm 8 years into the jet engine job, and things are going really smoothly, and I'm really trying to transition out of being a mechanic into a pilot position. Now I'm 34, so we've covered some time. And this time I have a completely different strategy. I'm taking as bare minimum risk as possible, and and I feel like this is something that people can relate to. I don't come from a family with money. I don't have rich grandparents. In fact, I don't have any grandparents. They're all gone. I don't have rich mom and dad. I don't have rich in-laws. They're not just loaded to the gills and willing to throw money at everything. They're not an option for me to say, hey, could you pay for flight training? With the bankruptcy thing in the past, and with all things considered, I've got a mortgage now. I still have lingering student loans. I still have a truck payment, which the truck payment's not huge. You know, I'm not driving around in like some bougie truck, but either way, I have a lot of financial responsibilities. I got a lot of family responsibilities, and I cannot take on any more debt. And I can't really pay out of pocket every step of the way. So my new approach is I am going to advance my aviation career as much as I can, and that means I might be leaving Tinker and going to a legitimate company, something that isn't just a one-man shop. I've got a real strong possibility at a private jet company. I'll be going in there. I'm getting trained currently as the director of quality. So I'm going to go in there and just do as well as I can at that job. I'll be working Part 135 and Part 145 tasks. So that also applies towards my A&P, which will help me get my IA. And if I earn extra income and build my career in that direction, I'll have close contact with pilots and stuff. Perhaps I can leverage some of that experience and connections to try and move my way up the ladder. That additional pay can go towards flight training. If nothing else, I can always get a second job in the evenings out there at the same airport, and maybe work towing aircraft in and out of hangars, or work for a flight school like I did before, but strictly part-time as a mechanic, and use the money from the part-time job to pay for it. Regardless, I've got a couple different strategies I'm going to try. But the main purpose of this video is, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm an aircraft mechanic. I've got a passion for aviation, and I really want to fly. But I can't drop everything and just go out and just go do that, So I know there's probably a lot of other mechanics out there that are going through the same thing, kind of in the same spot. And you don't hear a lot of it on YouTube. You always see the guys that are like, well, I quit my job, and then my wife took care of all the kids, and I just dedicated myself to flying for 9 months straight, and I got my air transport pilot license, and everybody else can do it too. Or you've got the other guys that are like, well, I was a venture capitalist, and I just decided I wanted to get out of the grind of working for Goldman Sachs, and so I just went out and paid for buying an airplane, and doing all these crazy things. It's like, dude, I'm not a millionaire, all right? I got bills to pay, and I'm surviving. I'm not exactly thriving. So if this is a story that you can relate with, if this is a life situation you can relate with, I plan on making a video at least once a week to give my progress that I've made so far, and hopefully kind of try to keep track of the expenses that I use, and just try to see if this journey helps everybody. If that sounds like something you're interested, tune in next week and try to stick around. Thanks.